The champagne flute trembled in Isabelle Chen's hand as she watched the man across the gallery. He stood before a Caravaggio, one hand in the pocket of his midnight black suit, the other holding a glass of scotch he hadn't touched in 20 minutes. The amber liquid caught the gallery lights, still as glass. She'd been tracking his movements for an hour. He never looked at the art for more than 30 seconds. His eyes, gray as Thames fog, swept the room in calculated arcs, cataloging exits, counting security guards, noting the positions of the catering staff who moved like choreographed dancers between clusters of London's elite. Ms. Chen, her boss, Gerald Hartley, materialized at her elbow, his cologne preceding him by several seconds. The Rothschild collection representatives are asking about authentication timelines. Isabelle forced her attention back to Gerald, to the auction house that had employed her for 3 years, to the life she'd built examining brushstrokes and provenance chains. The tests should be complete by Wednesday. Tell them we're being thorough. Gerald's gaze followed hers across the room. Dominic Ashford, surprised to see him at a gallery opening, usually sends his people. The name landed like a stone in her stomach. Ashell had heard whispers everyone in London's art world had. Dominic Ashford, the man who'd consolidated 5 crime families under one empire in 3 years. The man whose legitimate businesses, galleries, restaurants, property development were as impeccable as his Savile Row suits. The man whose illegitimate ones remained shadows no journalist could illuminate without disappearing. He's into art, Isabelle kept her voice neutral, professional. Into controlling it, Gerald lowered his voice. Word is half the private collections in Mayfair move through his channels, nothing proven of course, never is with him. Dominic turned then, as if sensing their discussion. His eyes found Isabelle's across 40 feet of marble floor and crystal chandeliers. The contact lasted 3 seconds, enough for her breath to catch, enough for recognition to flicker across his features, enough for him to smile. The smile didn't reach his eyes. "Excuse me, Gerald." Isabelle set down her champagne and crossed the gallery before common sense could stop her. She'd spent 6 months researching the Ashford family while authenticating pieces that kept appearing at auction with suspiciously clean histories. 6 months building a file of connections, shell companies, and whispers. 6 months preparing to hand everything to the authorities. And now the man himself stood in her gallery, looking at her like he knew every secret she'd ever kept. "Mr. Ashford," she extended her hand. "Isabelle Chen, I'm the head authenticator here." His palm was warm, his grip controlled. "I know who you are, Miss Chen." The admission should have frightened her. Instead, adrenaline sharpened her senses, the bergamot in his cologne, the nearly imperceptible scar along his jawline, the way his thumb brushed her knuckles before releasing her hand. "Are you interested in the Caravaggio?" She gestured to the painting, Judith beheading Holofernes, all violence and shadow. "I'm interested in authenticity," his gaze never left her face, "in whether things are what they claim to be. The provenance is solid, I verified it myself. I wasn't talking about the painting." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the murmur of conversation and the string quartet in the corner playing Vivaldi. Isabelle's heartbeat pounded against her ribs. "Then what were you talking about?" Dominic stepped closer. He smelled like expensive whiskey and something darker, gunpowder maybe, or just danger. "I think you know, Isabelle. May I call you Isabelle?" "No." His laugh was soft, appreciative. "Honest, I respect that." He withdrew a business card from his jacket, heavy stock, embossed. "When you're ready to discuss your research, call me. We should talk before you make any decisions you'll regret." Her blood turned to ice. "I don't know what you mean." "Of course you don't," he handed her the card. "But when you remember, call, day or night. I'm always available for matters of authentication." He walked away before she could respond, his security detail materializing from the crowd like smoke becoming solid. Isabelle stood frozen, the card burning in her hand, watching him disappear through the gallery doors into the London night. She looked down. The card was black with silver lettering, Dominic Ashford, and a phone number, nothing else. She turned it over. On the back, in handwritten ink, "Run if you dare, I will always find you." Isabelle didn't go home that night. She took 3 different tubes, doubled back twice, and ended up at her friend Priya's flat in Brixton at midnight. Priya, bartender and eternal night owl, opened the door in an oversized jumper and leggings, took one look at Isabelle's face and pulled her inside. "What happened?" I need to stay here tonight, maybe a few nights. Isabelle dropped onto the sofa, her hands still shaking. And I need to borrow your laptop, can't use mine. Priya sat beside her, tucking her legs underneath her. Babe, you're scaring me, what's going on? I can't tell you, the less you know the safer you are. That's exactly the kind of thing people say before everything goes to shit. But Priya retrieved her laptop anyway, setting it on Isabelle's lap. At least tell me if you're in danger. I don't know yet. Isabelle pulled up her encrypted email. The file was there, still safe in the cloud, hundreds of pages documenting the Ashford family's art smuggling operation. Paintings stolen from war zones, pieces with fabricated histories, masterworks that should have been in museums hanging in oligarchs' penthouses. She'd been planning to send it to Interpol tomorrow morning. Now Dominic Ashford knew she existed, knew what she'd been doing, how, who'd talked. Her phone buzzed, unknown number. You're at 47 Barrington Road, flat 2B, purple door, broken security camera. Your friend makes an excellent gin martini. Go home, Isabelle, running only makes this harder. Isabelle's stomach dropped. She showed Priya the message. Fuck, Priya's face went pale. How does he? I have to leave now, I'm sorry. Isabelle was already moving, shoving the laptop back at Priya, grabbing her coat. Don't call me, don't text me. If anyone asks, you haven't seen me since last week. Isabelle. I'm serious, Pri. These people don't make threats, they make examples. She took the back exit, emerging into an alley that smelled of bins and rain. London stretched around her, 7 million people and nowhere to hide. Her phone buzzed again. Smart girl, but where will you go? Your sister's in Manchester. Shall I send flowers? Your parents are in Bristol for their anniversary. Lovely restaurant they chose. Would be a shame if something happened to interrupt their evening. Isabelle's blood turned to ice. He was threatening her family. She typed back with shaking fingers, leave them alone, this is between us. The response came immediately, then stop running, come to me, we'll discuss terms. What terms? Yours, mine, the ones that keep everyone breathing. She stood in the alley, rain beginning to fall, and made a choice. She could run, take the file to the police, to Interpol, disappear into witness protection, and hope Dominic Ashford's reach wasn't as long as his reputation suggested. Or she could walk into the lion's den and negotiate. Her phone rang, the same unknown number. I know you're considering your options, Dominic's voice was silk and steel. Let me simplify them. You have information I need to stay buried. I have resources that could end your life or improve it significantly. Most people in your position would take the latter. I'm not most people. No, you're not. Something shifted in his tone. Was that admiration? You're the woman who spent 6 months building a case against one of London's most powerful families, knowing exactly what we do to people who cross us. That's either remarkably brave or remarkably stupid. Maybe both. He laughed, genuinely this time. Come to the Ashford Club, Mayfair, 1 hour, come alone or don't come at all. If you run, Isabelle, I will find you, but it won't be gentle and it won't be just you who pays the price. The line went dead. Isabelle stood in the rain, water soaking through her coat, and hailed a taxi. The Ashford Club occupied a Georgian building in Mayfair, all white stone and black railings, the kind of establishment that didn't advertise because its clientele didn't need directions. A doorman in a dark suit opened the entrance before Isabelle could knock. Ms. Chen, you're expected. Inside, the club whispered wealth, mahogany panels, crystal chandeliers, Persian rugs that cost more than her annual salary. Men in expensive suits occupied leather chairs, reading newspapers and smoking cigars. None of them looked up as she passed. The doorman led her to a private lift that rose 3 floors and opened directly into a penthouse office. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Hyde Park. Rain streaked the glass, turning London's lights into watercolor smears. Dominic stood by the window, his suit jacket discarded, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows. A tumbler of whiskey sat on the desk beside him, next to a manila folder she recognized instantly. Her research, her file, her 6 months of work. How the word caught in her throat. Gerald Hartley has expensive tastes and mounting gambling debts. Dominic turned, his expression unreadable. He's been supplementing his income by informing me which pieces might attract unwanted scrutiny. Imagine his panic when I showed him what his star authenticator had been compiling. Betrayal tasted like copper, Gerald wouldn't. Everyone has a price, Isabelle, his was survival. Dominic gestured to the chair across from his desk. Sit, please. She remained standing. If you're going to kill me, get it over with. Kill you? His eyebrows rose. Why would I kill my favorite authenticator? Because I know everything. Your shell companies, your smuggling routes, the pieces you've moved. Yes, quite impressive research. He opened the folder, flipping through pages. Thorough, accurate, a few gaps, you missed the Dubai connection, but overall, exceptional work. He looked up. How would you like a job? Isabelle stared. You're joking. I never joke about business. He closed the folder. You're wasted at that auction house. Gerald takes credit for your work, pays you a fraction of what you're worth, and clearly can't be trusted to keep his mouth shut. I'm offering you a position, head of acquisitions, 6 figures to start, bonuses based on performance. Acquisitions of stolen art. Acquisitions of art whose ownership is flexible, he smiled. There's a war in every corner of the world, Isabelle. Museums burn, private collections get liquidated, families sell heirlooms to pay debts. Someone's going to facilitate those transactions. It might as well be someone who appreciates the work, someone who ensures the pieces end up with collectors who will preserve them. That's a pretty way of describing theft. And what you were planning, handing centuries of masterworks over to government bureaucracies that'll lock them in warehouse basements, that's preservation? He moved closer. I've seen more art than most museum curators. I know the provenance of every piece in my collection. I protect them. By selling them to criminals. By ensuring they survive. His voice hardened. The Rembrandt you authenticated last month, stolen from a Jewish family in 1943, sold 3 times since, now hanging in a Dutch museum that refuses to return it to the survivors' grandchildren. The Monet at Christie's, the family that owned it collaborated with fascists. Should their descendants profit from genocide? That's not the law. The law is written by people with power to protect their interests. He was close enough now that she could see gold flecks in his gray eyes. Ideal in reality, Isabelle, not ideology, and the reality is you have 2 choices, work with me or work against me. Only one of those options ends with you breathing. Her pulse hammered. That's not a choice, that's coercion. Yes, he didn't apologize, but it's honest coercion. I'm not pretending to be something I'm not. And what are you? A man who built an empire from nothing. A man who controls half of London because I'm willing to do what others won't. A man who keeps his word. When I promise protection, I deliver. When I promise consequences, I deliver those too. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His fingers brushed her cheek, tucking a strand of wet hair behind her ear. You're afraid of me, he murmured. Good, you should be, but you're also curious. You want to know what it's like to stop following rules that were designed to keep people like you in your place, to use your gifts without apology, to be powerful. I'm not like you. Not yet, his thumb traced her jawline, but you could be. Isabelle's breath caught. Every logical cell in her brain screamed to run, to fight, to reject everything he offered. But something deeper, something she didn't want to examine, responded to the heat in his gaze, the promise in his touch, the dangerous truth that she'd spent 6 months chasing him for reasons that had nothing to do with justice. She'd wanted his attention, now she had it. If I say yes, her voice was barely a whisper, what happens to my research, to the file? Destroyed, completely, no copies, no traces. He stepped back, breaking the spell. And you join my organization, you'll authenticate acquisitions, establish provenance, advise on which pieces are worth the risk. In return, you'll be protected, compensated, and given access to collections most curators only dream of. And if I say no? His expression didn't change, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. Then I'll be disappointed, and your family will receive flowers at their funerals. Not an empty threat. Isabelle saw the truth of it in his face. Dominic Ashford would kill her and everyone she loved without losing a night's sleep. I need time to think. You have until morning, 9 a.m. Call the number on my card. He returned to the window, dismissing her. My driver will take you wherever you want to go. I'd suggest somewhere public, well lit, somewhere you feel safe making this decision. At the door she paused. Why me? You could force any authenticator to do this. Dominic looked at her reflection in the rain-streaked glass. Because forcing people creates resentment. I prefer willing partners, and because you're brilliant, fearless, and you look at art the way I do, like you're in love with something that will never love you back." His smile was sad. "We're alike, Isabelle, whether you want to admit it or not. Both of us alone, both of us hungry, both of us one step away from the abyss." She left before he could see that he was right. Isabelle spent the night in an airport hotel near Heathrow, watching planes take off through the window. She could board one, disappear, change her name, her face, her life. But Dominic would find her, she believed that absolutely. And worse, she wasn't sure she wanted to run. At 3 a.m. she called her sister. "Belle, what's wrong?" May's voice was thick with sleep. "Nothing, I wanted to hear your voice." "It's 3 in the morning." "I know, I'm sorry." Isabelle closed her eyes. "May, if I did something morally complicated, would you still love me?" Silence. "Then what are you planning?" "I can't say, I just need to know." "Of course I'd still love you." May's voice softened. "You're my sister, nothing changes that, but Belle, whatever you're considering, is it legal?" "Gray area. Gray like tax evasion or gray like murder?" "Somewhere in between." Another pause. "Are you safe?" "No, yes." "You're lying. May. Just promise me you'll call if you need help, real help, not middle of the night existential crisis help." "I promise." They said goodbye. Isabelle stared at her phone, at Dominic's card beside it, at the choice that wasn't really a choice. At 8:59 a.m. she called. "Your answer." Dominic's voice was crisp, alert. "Yes, on 3 conditions." "I'm listening." 1. My family stays untouchable, forever, they don't become leverage. "Agreed." 2. I don't authenticate anything with proven Holocaust provenance, those pieces go back to surviving families. A pause. "Acceptable." And 3. If I ever want out, you let me go, no retaliation, no threats. "No." Her heart sank. "Then you can leave, Isabelle, but not until you've worked off your value. 3 years, after that you're free, no retaliation, no pursuit, you walk away clean. 3 years, 1,000 days, but also freedom eventually." "Deal." "Good, a car will collect you in 30 minutes, we have work to do." "Where are we going?" "Paris, there's a collection coming up for private auction. You're going to tell me if it's worth 10 million euros or if the seller is trying to pass off elaborate fakes." "Paris today." "Welcome to your new life, Isabelle, it moves fast." The line went dead. The next 3 months passed in a blur of private jets, luxury hotels, and masterpieces that shouldn't exist outside museums. Isabelle authenticated a Vermeer in Dubai, a Klimt in Hong Kong, a collection of Ming Dynasty scrolls in Singapore. She met oligarchs and oil magnates, tech billionaires and hereditary peers, people whose wealth operated on a scale that made morality irrelevant. And everywhere always Dominic. He never touched her again after that first night, but his presence was constant, across negotiating tables in the back of town cars, standing behind her as she examined brushstrokes under UV light. He watched her work with an intensity that made her skin prickle, asked questions that revealed an encyclopedic knowledge of art history, and occasionally, late at night over whiskey in whatever city they found themselves, talked about beauty in a way that broke her heart. "My mother was a cleaner," he told her once in a hotel bar in Rome. Rain drummed against the windows, scrubbed floors in Kensington townhouses. "She used to take me with her sometimes before school. I'd wait in the halls looking at the paintings, all that beauty locked away where only the wealthy could see it." "Is that why you do this, democratize access?" His laugh was bitter. "I do this because I'm good at it, and because the alternative was staying in Hackney watching men like my father drink themselves to death while the world ignored them." He swirled his whiskey. "But yes, there's satisfaction in taking what the powerful hoard, in proving that beauty belongs to whoever can appreciate it, not whoever inherited the right surname. That's almost noble." "Don't romanticize me, Isabelle, I'm not noble, I'm efficient, there's a difference." But sometimes, when he looked at a painting, she saw something soft in his expression, something vulnerable. It never lasted more than a moment before his mask slid back into place, but she began to collect those moments like pressed flowers. "Dangerous, so dangerous." "You're falling for him," Priya said during one of their carefully encrypted video calls. "I can hear it in your voice." "I'm not." Isabelle adjusted her laptop screen. She was in Prague in a penthouse suite while Dominic met with collectors downstairs. "I'm surviving." Surviving doesn't make you smile like that when you say his name. Pry. I'm not judging, I'm worried. This man threatened your family, coerced you, fundamentally upended your life, and now you're, what, developing Stockholm Syndrome. Was she? Isabelle didn't have an answer, the lines had blurred. Dominic was a criminal, yes, but he'd kept every promise. Her family remained safe. He'd returned 3 paintings to Holocaust survivors' families without being asked. He paid her triple what Gerald had, respected her expertise, and listened when she spoke. And when they were alone, late at night, talking about art and ambition and the weight of wanting too much from a world that gave too little, she forgot to be afraid. 3 years, Isabelle said finally. I just need to survive 3 years. And then what? Then I'm free. But freedom felt less certain every day. Everything changed in Vienna. They'd come to authenticate a supposed Egon Skiel, a nude study that a collector swore had been in his family since 1918. The moment Isabelle saw it, she knew. It's a fake, she turned to Dominic, ignoring the collector's protests. A good one, probably painted in the 1960s by someone who studied Skiel extensively. But the canvas is wrong, the pigments are wrong, and there's an ultraviolet signature that didn't exist until after World War II. The collector, a silver-haired Austrian with cold eyes, set down his wine glass. I paid 2 million euros for this piece. Then you were swindled. Isabelle pulled out her magnifying glass, pointing to the brushstrokes. See here, Skiel had a distinctive technique. I don't care about technique, I care about investment. The collector looked at Dominic. You vouched for this piece. I vouched for an authentication which you're receiving. Dominic's voice was ice. Ms. Chen is the best in the field. If she says it's fake, it's fake. Then I want my money back. Take it up with whoever sold it to you. The collector stood abruptly. This isn't finished, Ashford, you've cost me a fortune. You've cost yourself a fortune by not verifying before purchase. Dominic didn't move. We're done here. Later in the car back to the hotel, Isabelle felt the tension radiating from Dominic's silence. I'm sorry, she said. I know you wanted that deal. Never apologize for doing your job correctly. He stared out the window at Vienna's streets glittering with rain. That collector is a problem though. He has connections, friends in the Russian government. He doesn't lose gracefully. What does that mean? Dominic looked at her and something in his expression made her stomach drop. It means we leave Vienna tonight, and for the next few weeks you stay close to me, closer than usual. You think he'll retaliate? I think men like that don't accept humiliation, and you just humiliated him in front of his peers. He reached across the seat, taking her hand. His palm was warm, rough with calluses that seemed at odds with his expensive suits. I won't let anything happen to you, Isabelle, that's a promise. She should pull away, maintain boundaries. Remember that this was a business arrangement, nothing more. Instead, she squeezed his hand back. I trust you. His eyes darkened. You shouldn't. But she did, God help her, she did. The attack came at 3 a.m. Isabelle woke to the sound of breaking glass. For a moment, sleep-fogged and disoriented, she thought she'd dreamed it. Then Dominic was there, moving through her hotel room door that connected to his suite, dressed in black, a gun in his hand. Stay down, he commanded. More glass breaking, shouts in German, gunfire, actual gunfire, loud as thunder. Dominic returned fire through the doorway, his expression utterly calm, like this was routine. Maybe it was. How many? Isabelle pressed herself against the bed, heart hammering. 4, maybe 5? He ejected a magazine, loaded a fresh one with practiced ease. When I tell you to run, you go out the window, fire escape, turn left down the alley, there's a black Mercedes 2 streets over, driver's name is Thomas, tell him Nightingale. What about you? I'll handle this. Dominic. He looked at her then, and the intensity in his gaze stole her breath. If something happens to me, Thomas will get you to London. There's a safe deposit box at Barclays Piccadilly branch. Key is taped under the desk drawer in my office. Everything you need is inside. Money, documents, contacts. Stop talking like you're going to die. I'm not planning to, but plans change. He moved to the doorway, fired twice more. Someone screamed, ready. No. Good enough, run now. Isabelle ran. She threw herself out the window onto the fire escape barefoot, wearing only the silk pajamas she'd been sleeping in. The metal was ice cold against her feet. Behind her, gunfire continued, sharp cracks that echoed off Vienna's buildings. The alley, turn left. She ran on autopilot, her mind blank with terror. The Mercedes was exactly where Dominic said, engine already running. Nightingale, she gasped to the driver. Thomas, broad-shouldered, scarred, utterly unfazed, nodded. Get in. Not without Dominic. Ms. Chen. I'm not leaving him. Thomas sighed, pulled a gun from the glove box and handed it to her. Safety's here, point away from yourself, don't shoot unless you're sure. She took the gun. It was heavier than she expected, cold and real and terrifying. They waited 3 minutes that felt like hours. Then Dominic appeared at the alley entrance, limping, blood staining his shirt. 2 men followed him, his security, she realized, not attackers. Thomas was out of the car instantly, helping Dominic into the back seat. Isabelle slid in beside him, her hands shaking as she examined his wound. It's nothing, Dominic said through gritted teeth. Grazed my side, I've had worse. You're bleeding everywhere. It's dramatic, not fatal. Thomas Airport Private Terminal. The car lurched forward. Isabelle pressed her hands against Dominic's wound, trying to slow the bleeding. He hissed in pain but didn't push her away. I told you to run, he said. I did run, then I came back. Stupid. Probably. He laughed, then winced. Christ, don't make me laugh. Then don't get shot. His hand covered hers, blood slick and warm. You waited for me. Of course I did. Something shifted in his expression, surprise maybe, or something deeper. No one waits for me, Isabelle. I'm not no one. No, his thumb traced circles on her wrist. You're really not. They flew to London through the pre-dawn darkness. Dominic passed out on pain medication while Isabelle held his hand and tried not to think about how completely her life had changed. 3 months ago, she'd been an authenticator with a normal life and a moral compass. Now she was sitting in a blood-stained private jet, holding hands with a criminal, and the scariest part was, she wouldn't change it. She was falling, she'd been falling for weeks. And there was no safety net below. Dominic recovered in a safe house in Surrey, a sprawling estate hidden behind stone walls and armed guards. Isabelle stayed with him, telling herself it was to ensure his wound healed properly, that someone needed to change his bandages. The truth was simpler, she couldn't leave. They fell into a routine. Mornings, she worked on authentication requests remotely, examining high-resolution images of paintings and sculptures. Afternoons, she read while Dominic handled business calls in his study. Evenings, they ate dinner together on the terrace overlooking the gardens, talking about everything except the obvious. A week passed too, the wound healed, Dominic grew stronger. And the tension between them grew unbearable. Tell me something true, Dominic said one night. They were in the library, him on the sofa with a book he wasn't reading, her in the armchair by the fire. Rain battered the windows. Something you've never told anyone. Isabelle looked up from her laptop. Why? Because I want to know you, the real you, not the woman who evaluates paintings, not the woman who pretends she doesn't feel what's between us. Her heart skipped. What's between us? He set down his book, holding her gaze. You know exactly what. She did. She'd been avoiding it, but she did. I'm afraid, she admitted quietly, of you, of this, of how quickly everything changed. Good, fear keeps you sharp. He stood, moving to the fireplace, staring into the flames. I'm afraid too, if that helps. You afraid of what? Of how much I want this. You. He turned, and the vulnerability in his expression made her chest ache. I've built everything in my life on control, Isabelle, absolute control. And then you showed up with your file and your righteous anger and your brilliant mind, and suddenly I couldn't control anything. Couldn't control wanting to hear your thoughts. Couldn't control looking for you in every room. Couldn't control the way my heart stopped when those men came for you in Vienna. Isabelle set her laptop aside, standing on shaking legs. Dominic. I'm not good, Isabelle. I've done things that would make you run if you knew the details. I've hurt people, killed people, built an empire on violence and fear, and I don't regret it because it's kept me alive, kept me powerful, kept me from ever being that helpless boy in Hackney again. He stepped closer. But with you I want to be good, want to be worthy of the way you look at me when you think I'm not watching, and I don't know how. Her breath caught. You think I look at you a certain way. Like I'm art you're trying to authenticate, like you're searching for something real underneath all the carefully constructed layers. His hand rose, cupping her cheek. Have you found it yet? Anything real? She leaned into his touch, all her resistance crumbling. Yes. What? This, she kissed him. For a moment, Dominic froze, surprise, maybe, or disbelief. Then his arms came around her, pulling her against him, and he kissed her back with a desperation that matched her own. It was nothing like she'd imagined. It was better and worse, gentle and consuming, a cliff edge and a homecoming. His hands threaded through her hair, her fingers clutched his shirt. They broke apart only to breathe, foreheads pressed together. This is a terrible idea, she whispered. The worst, he kissed her again, softer this time. We can stop if you want, I won't, I'd never force. I know, and she did. For all his power, all his capacity for violence, she trusted Dominic Ashford absolutely. I don't want to stop. Isabelle, her name was a prayer, a warning, a question. Yes. They barely made it upstairs. Reality crashed back 3 weeks later in the form of a phone call. Isabelle was curled in Dominic's bed, watching dawn light creep across the ceiling when his mobile rang. He answered on the second ring, his voice still rough with sleep. What? A pause, his body went rigid. When? Another pause longer. Lock it down, full security protocols, I'll be there in 2 hours. He hung up, already moving, pulling on clothes with efficient precision. What's wrong? Isabelle sat up, clutching the sheet. The Viennese collector, he's made a move. Dominic's face was carved from stone. Hired a team to hit one of my warehouses in East London. They got past security, made off with 8 pieces. Which pieces? The Modigliani you authenticated last month, the Rothko, 3 Picassos, a Matisse, 2 early Renaissance panels I was planning to auction next month. He strapped on a shoulder holster, checked his gun. 20 million pounds gone, and that's not the worst part. Ice crystallized in her stomach. What's the worst part? He left a message? Dominic turned, his eyes dark with fury and something else, fear, spray painted on the warehouse wall. Return what you stole or I take her instead. Her, Isabelle's blood turned to ice. He knows about us, it wasn't a question. Everyone knows about us by now, we haven't exactly been discreet. Dominic crossed to her, gripping her shoulders. Listen to me, you're going into lockdown, full protection detail, you don't leave this property, you don't take calls from anyone except me, and you certainly don't. No. His eyes flashed, this isn't a negotiation, Isabelle. You're right, it's not. She pushed his hands away, climbing out of bed, finding her clothes. I'm not hiding while you go to war over me, that man wants revenge because I called his painting a fake. This is my mess. This is business, you just happen to be the catalyst. Exactly, so let me fix it. She pulled on her jeans, her mind already working through possibilities. What if we give him what he wants? 20 million in stolen art, are you mad? Not the art, justice. She faced him, arms crossed. He paid 2 million for a fake skeel, someone swindled him. What if we find out who, give him a target for his anger that isn't you or me? Dominic stared at her like she'd sprouted a second head. You want to investigate art fraud now. I want to redirect his fury before this turns into open warfare. She moved closer, placing her palms on his chest. You said yourself men like him don't accept humiliation, but they do accept scapegoats. Find him someone to blame, someone who actually deserves it, and he might back down. Or he might take the information and kill us anyway. Maybe, but right now he's already trying to kill us. This gives us a chance at de-escalation. She met his gaze. Trust me, I'm good at this, it's literally what I do. Dominic's jaw worked. She could see him calculating odds, weighing risks, fighting every protective instinct that screamed at him to lock her away somewhere safe. Finally, he exhaled, 48 hours, you have 48 hours to find me a name. After that, we do this my way. Deal. But you're not doing this alone. Marcus and Sophie go with you everywhere, and Isabelle? He pulled her close, his voice dropping to something dangerous. If anything happens to you, there won't be enough pieces of Vienna left to rebuild, understand? She shivered from fear or arousal or some twisted combination. Understood. He kissed her hard and possessive, then released her. Get to work. Isabelle started with the provenance paperwork the collector had provided. Carefully forged documents claiming the skill had been sold by the artist's widow in 1920, passed through 3 generations of a fictitious Austrian family, then sold privately in 2018. "It's good work," she told Sophie, Dominic's lead security specialist and the most terrifyingly competent woman Isabelle had ever met. They were in Dominic's London office, paperwork spread across the conference table. Whoever created this knew exactly what collectors look for. They didn't just forge the documents, they created an entire fictional history. Sophie leaned over her shoulder, scanning the pages. Ex-military, Isabelle had learned with a background in intelligence. She wore her black hair in a severe bun and carried enough weapons to start a small war. "There's a signature here, estate lawyer, name's probably fake, but it's a starting point." "The sale happened in Geneva." Isabelle pulled up her laptop, accessing the international art authentication database she'd helped build in her previous life, her legitimate life. She corrected herself, though that distinction felt increasingly meaningless. "Private auction house, Mason Durand, they facilitate discreet sales for high-net-worth individuals." "How discreet?" "The kind where questions aren't encouraged." Isabelle found the listing, "but they have to keep records for tax purposes if we can access their files." "Say no more." Sophie pulled out her phone, typed rapidly. "I know someone who specializes in acquiring reluctant information. She owes me a favor." 2 hours later, they had the Mason Durand files. The seller had used a shell company registered in Luxembourg. The actual painting had been delivered by courier, never seen by anyone at the auction house except a junior cataloger who'd accepted the forged provenance at face value. "Dead end," Sophie said flatly. "No, look," Isabelle pointed at the shipping manifest. "The courier company, I recognize this. They're based in Berlin. They do a lot of work moving art between galleries, legitimate work mostly, but 3 years ago they were involved in a scandal, a Vermeer that turned out to be fake. The gallery blamed the courier for switching the painting en route, but nothing was ever proven." She pulled up news articles, her heart racing. "The owner, Hans Müller, he disappeared after the investigation. Rumor was he fled to Eastern Europe." Sophie's eyes gleamed. "Now that's interesting." "They tracked Hans Müller through 3 countries and 5 aliases before finding him in Budapest, running a small gallery that specialized in estate sales from aristocratic families fallen on hard times." Every painting Isabelle examined online screamed forgery. "This is our guy," she told Dominic over an encrypted video call. He was still in London, managing the fallout from the warehouse robbery. "Hans Müller is creating elaborate fakes and selling them through legitimate channels. The Viennese collector isn't his only victim. I've found at least 6 other suspicious sales in the past 5 years." "Can you prove it?" "Given access to the paintings and proper testing equipment, absolutely." "Then we're going to Budapest." Dominic's face was grim. "Tomorrow, be ready." "Dominic, you can't just..." "Can't what? March into his gallery and demand answers." His smile was cold. "Watch me." Budapest in autumn was beautiful, the Danube reflecting golden light, leaves crunching underfoot, the smell of chimney cakes and coffee. Isabelle might have enjoyed it if she wasn't walking into a forger's gallery with a crime lord and 2 armed guards. Müller's establishment was a narrow building in the 5th district, wedged between a bookshop and a cafe. The windows displayed Renaissance portraits, Impressionist landscapes, all carefully lit and beautifully framed. All fake, Isabelle could tell from the doorway. A bell chimed as they entered. Hans Müller looked up from behind the counter, 60s, silver beard, expensive glasses, the very picture of a refined art dealer. His eyes widened at the sight of Dominic. "Mr. Ashford, this is unexpected." "I'm sure it is." Dominic's voice could have frozen the Danube. "We need to talk privately." Müller's gaze darted to the door, calculating escape routes. Sophie shifted position, blocking his exit. The dealer's shoulders slumped in defeat. "Upstairs," he said quietly. The apartment above the gallery smelled of turpentine and linseed oil. Canvases leaned against every wall. Works in progress, Isabelle realized, forgeries in various stages of completion. "You're good," she said, examining a half-finished Klimt. "Really good, the technique is nearly perfect." "Thank you." Müller sounded genuinely pleased before remembering the circumstances. "I assume you're not here to commission work." We're here about the skill you sold to Victor Constantin. Dominic settled into a chair like he owned the place. The fake one that's caused me considerable trouble. Mueller paled. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't insult our intelligence. Sophie moved to the window, watching the street below. We have the shipping records, the false provenance, the courier trail that leads directly to you. Victor is a dangerous man, Mueller said desperately. If he finds out I sold him a forgery. He already knows. Isabelle turned from the painting. I told him that's why we're here. He's demanding restitution and Mr. Ashford would prefer to give him you instead of starting a war. The blood drained from Mueller's face. He'll kill me. Probably. Dominic's tone was utterly indifferent. Unless you give us something better, names, clients, everyone you've sold forgeries to in the past 5 years. I can't. They'll what? Be less merciful than Victor Constantin? Dominic leaned forward. You're a talented forger, Mueller, talented enough that I might have use for you if you cooperate, but if you waste my time with denials, I'll gift-wrap you with a bow and deliver you to Vienna personally. Mueller's hands shook. What do you want? Everything, client list, provenance documents, which paintings, which buyers, how much you charged. Isabelle pulled out her tablet. And you're going to help me draft a very specific letter to Victor Constantin explaining exactly how you deceived him and offering full restitution. I don't have 2 million euros. No, but I do. Dominic smiled without humor. Consider it an investment in not having gang warfare disrupt my business. Constantin gets his money back, you get witness protection in a country of my choosing, and everyone walks away breathing. Barely. And if I refuse? Then you'll discover exactly how creative I can be with punishment. Something in Dominic's eyes made even Isabelle's blood run cold. Choose quickly, my patience has limits. Mueller chose survival. For the next 6 hours, Isabelle documented everything. 43 forgeries sold over 7 years, buyers spanning 3 continents, a network of complicit galleries and auction houses that had either been fooled or were actively participating. It was the art fraud case of the century, wrapped up and ready for prosecution. Or leverage, depending on how Dominic chose to use it. This is incredible work, she murmured to him while Mueller printed documents in the next room. We could expose the entire operation, clean up the art world. Or we could profit from knowing everyone's secrets. Dominic's hand found the small of her back. Which do you prefer? 6 months ago, the answer would have been obvious. Expose it, do the right thing, follow the law. Now, Isabelle looked at the evidence they'd gathered, at Dominic's expectant expression, at Sophie standing guard by the door, and realized she didn't know any more. I think, she said slowly, that we should do whatever keeps us alive and powerful enough to make these choices in the future. Dominic's smile was proud, possessive. That's my girl. And God help her, the words made her heart soar. They delivered Mueller's confession to Victor Constantin via courier, along with a cashier's check for 2 million euros and a not-so-subtle message. Problem solved. We're even. Don't make this complicated. Victor, pragmatist that he was, accepted. The warehouse robberies stopped, the threats evaporated, an uneasy peace settled over Dominic's empire. Isabelle should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt hollowed out, like something essential had been carved away during those hours in Budapest, watching her moral compass spin wildly before settling on a new north. You're quiet, Dominic observed. They were back at the Surrey estate, sitting on the terrace as autumn sunset painted the gardens gold. Regretting your choices? I don't know what I'm feeling. That's honest at least. He poured them both wine. For what it's worth, you did the right thing. Mueller was destroying people's trust in art, now he can't. Because he's in your pocket instead. Because he's alive and making restitution to his victims under supervision. Dominic met her gaze. I'm not the villain you think I am, Isabelle. I don't think you're a villain. She accepted the wine, swirling it absently. That's the problem, you should be the villain. You traffic in stolen art, you've killed people, you run a criminal empire. In any reasonable story, you'd be the monster. And yet you've kept every promise you've made to me. You protected my family. You listened when I said no Holocaust art. You trusted me to solve the Victor problem instead of just executing him. She looked at him, this impossibly complicated man. You're not good, Dominic, but you're not evil either. You're something in between, and I don't know what to do with that. You could love me anyway. The words hung in the twilight between them. I think I already do, she whispered, and I hate myself for it. Dominic set down his wine and pulled her into his lap. His arms came around her, solid and warm. Don't hate yourself, I mean, nothing about what you feel is wrong. I've compromised everything I believed in. No, you've evolved, there's a difference. His hand cupped her face, tilting it toward his. The woman you were 6 months ago saw the world in black and white, right and wrong, legal and illegal. But that woman wouldn't have survived in my world. She wouldn't have saved us in Vienna or solved the Mueller situation or built the life you're building now. What life? I'm a criminal's. What am I to you exactly? Everything. The word was simple, absolute. You're everything, Isabelle, my authenticator, my advisor, my conscience when I need one, my partner in every sense that matters. And yes, the woman I love, have loved since that first night at the gallery, if I'm honest. I've just been waiting for you to catch up. Tears pricked her eyes. I'm not who I used to be. Thank God for that. The woman you used to be would never have been brave enough to kiss me. He brushed his lips against hers, gentle, reverent. I love who you're becoming, all of it. The brilliance and the doubts, the fierce morality and the willingness to bend rules, the woman who runs toward danger and the woman who cries in my arms afterward, all of it. She kissed him then, tasting wine and truth and the future unfolding between them like a path through darkness, uncertain, treacherous, and theirs. I love you too, she said against his mouth. God help me, I do. Then stay, not because of our agreement, not because you're afraid, stay because you want this life with me. It should have been impossible, should have been a betrayal of everything she'd once valued. Instead, it felt like coming home. Yes, Isabelle said, I'll stay. The next 2 years passed in a blur of cities and masterpieces, negotiations and close calls, the building of something that felt uncomfortably like happiness. Isabelle became a fixture in Dominic's empire, respected, feared, essential. Collectors requested her specifically for authentication. Rival families learned not to challenge her assessments. The art world, both legitimate and shadow, whispered her name with a mixture of awe and envy. She'd become what she'd once hunted, a facilitator in a criminal enterprise, but she'd also become something else, a guardian of art in a world that saw masterpieces only as investments. She ensured pieces went to collectors who'd preserve them. She vetted buyers to prevent treasures from disappearing into private vaults, never to be seen again. She built a private museum on Dominic's estate, open by appointment to researchers and students, filling it with works that deserved to be studied. You're reforming me? Dominic teased one evening. They were in the museum, standing before a newly acquired Monet, legally purchased at auction, properly documented. I'm becoming respectable. You're becoming smart. Legitimate businesses are better long-term investments than criminal ones. Isabelle leaned into his side, his arms settling around her waist with familiar ease. Plus, respectable collectors live longer. Worried about my longevity. Someone has to be, she turned in his arms. You still have enemies, Dominic. Victor might have backed off, but there are others, the Russians, the Irish, that prosecutor who's been investigating your operations for 3 years. Emma, right? Yes, she's persistent. His expression hardened. But she has nothing concrete. Everything we've done lately has been carefully structured to be either legal or unprovable. Because of me. Because of us, you've made me better at this, Isabelle, smarter, more careful. He kissed her forehead. I should probably thank you for that. Thank me by staying alive. Deal. But even as she said it, Isabelle felt the familiar prickle of unease. They'd been too successful, too careful, too visible. In a world built on violence and betrayal, safety was always temporary. She just didn't know how temporary until the night Marcus came to their bedroom at 2 a.m., his face grim. Boss, we have a problem. Dominic was out of bed instantly, pulling on clothes. What kind? Emma Wright just executed search warrants on 3 of your properties. Warehouses in East London, the gallery in Notting Hill, and the office in Canary Wharf. Isabelle's blood turned cold. What's she looking for? Everything, financial records, shipping manifests, correspondence. Marcus met Dominic's gaze. She has someone on the inside, someone high up, has to get this much approved simultaneously. Who? Still working on that, but boss, they're looking for the Klimt. The Klimt, 3 months ago, Dominic had acquired a Klimt portrait from a Syrian collector whose family had owned it since 1920. The provenance was solid, the acquisition legal. But the painting had been on Interpol's watch list, suspected of being looted during World War II, though never proven. Isabelle had authenticated it, verified the provenance, confirmed the family's ownership chain was legitimate. But if Emma Wright had evidence suggesting otherwise? "Where is it?" she asked. "Still in the Notting Hill Gallery, in the vault." Dominic's jaw clenched, "protected but not hidden if she has a warrant." "She'll find it." Isabelle was already moving, pulling on jeans and a sweater. "We need to get there first." "Isabelle, no, if you're caught." "If I'm caught, I'll tell the truth, that I authenticated a painting with legitimate provenance, but if that Klimt disappears before she can catalog it, she'll claim you destroyed evidence." She grabbed her authentication kit. "Trust me, we do this by the book." Dominic looked like he wanted to argue, then his expression shifted, not resignation but respect. "Sophie drives, you don't go in unless it's clear, and Isabelle," he pulled her close, kissed her hard, "if this goes wrong, you tell them everything, you trade information for immunity, understand?" "I'm not. Promise me I can survive prison, I can't survive losing you." She saw the fear beneath his controlled exterior, the genuine terror that she'd pay the price for his choices. "I promise, but it won't come to that." It almost did. They reached the gallery 20 minutes before the police. Sophie's contacts had given them a narrow window. Emma Wright's team was executing the East London warrants first, working their way west. They had time, but not much. Isabelle went into the vault alone, documenting everything with her phone camera. The Klimt hung between a Skeel and an early Picasso, properly lit, exquisite. She photographed the painting, the provenance documents stored beside it, the vault's security logs showing every entry and exit for the past year. Then she heard sirens. "Time's up," Sophie said through her earpiece. "Police are 2 streets away, we need to go." "1 more minute." Isabelle photographed the last page of provenance, a letter from the Syrian family confirming the sale, notarized and witnessed. "Okay, The gallery's front door shattered. "Police, nobody move." Isabelle froze, still holding her phone, surrounded by millions in stolen, no, acquired art. Through the vault door she could see officers flooding in, guns drawn. Emma Wright appeared last, her expression triumphant. 50s gray hair, sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Isabelle Chen, fancy meeting you here at 2 a.m. I'm documenting inventory for insurance purposes." Isabelle kept her voice steady, professional, all legal work. "In the middle of the night, minutes before a police raid." Emma's smile was cold. "You'll forgive me if I'm skeptical. Step out of the vault, please, hands where I can see them." Isabelle complied, her heart hammering. Around her, officers were cataloging art, photographing everything, seizing records. This was bad, this was... "The Klimt," Emma said, nodding to an officer. "Catalog it, full documentation, and Ms. Chen," she turned, "you're under arrest for handling stolen property." "That painting isn't stolen, I have documentation." "Documentation you prepared, convenient." Emma nodded to another officer. "Read her rights, and someone find Dominic Ashford, he can't have gone far." But Dominic was gone. Sophie had gotten him clear before the police arrived. Only Isabelle remained, standing in the wreckage of their carefully constructed legitimacy, watching her future fracture. "I want a lawyer," she said. "Of course you do." Emma leaned close. "But here's the thing, Ms. Chen, we've been building this case for 3 years. We know about Vienna, Budapest, the warehouse, the Mueller connection, and we know you're at the center of it all, the brilliant authenticator who legitimized Ashford's entire operation, the woman who made crime look like art dealing." Isabelle said nothing. She'd promised Dominic she'd trade information for immunity if necessary. But Emma didn't know that Mueller was already cooperating with them, that Victor had been neutralized, that half of Emma's evidence probably came from sources they controlled. This was a game, and Isabelle had become very good at games. "I'll answer questions with my lawyer present," she said calmly. "Until then, I have nothing to say." Emma's expression darkened. "Take her in." The legal battle lasted 8 months, 8 months of depositions and hearings, evidence and counter-evidence, prosecution and defense dancing around what could and couldn't be proven. Emma Wright's case was circumstantial. She had documents showing Isabelle had authenticated dozens of pieces that moved through Dominic's organization. She had testimony from gallery employees placing Isabelle at various properties. She had financial records showing Isabelle received substantial payments from Ashford companies. What she didn't have was proof of knowing participation in criminal activity. Because Isabelle hadn't been sloppy, every authentication she'd performed was legitimate. Every piece she'd certified had verifiable provenance. The payments were documented as consulting fees, properly taxed and reported. And when the Klimt's provenance was independently verified by 3 museums, Emma's flagship charge collapsed. "The Crown is dropping the handling stolen property charge," Isabelle's lawyer, a shark named Penelope Quinn that Dominic had hired, announced with barely concealed satisfaction. "They're proceeding only with the conspiracy charges, and those are weak." How weak? Isabelle sat in the conference room of Quinn's Piccadilly office, exhausted from months of stress. She hadn't seen Dominic in person since her arrest. His lawyers had advised against contact during the trial. She survived on encrypted messages and the knowledge that he was out there, free, fighting for her. "Weak enough that I expect a directed acquittal after the Crown presents its case." Quinn tapped her pen against her legal pad. "You've been meticulous, Ms. Chen, almost suspiciously meticulous. Every piece of evidence the Crown has presented demonstrates competent authentication work, not criminal conspiracy." "Because I'm good at my job." "Because you're very, very careful." Quinn's gaze was knowing. "Which makes me think you anticipated this possibility, that you and Mr. Ashford planned for the day the authorities came calling." They had, not explicitly, but Isabelle had always insisted on proper documentation, legitimate provenance, legal structures, not out of fear but out of professional pride. She wouldn't attach her name to shoddy work, criminal or otherwise. It turned out integrity, even criminal integrity, was its own protection. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Emma Wright presented her case with prosecutorial zeal, documents, testimonies, connections drawn between Isabelle and various Ashford operations. But under cross-examination, her witnesses crumbled. Gallery employees admitted they'd never seen Isabelle do anything illegal. Financial experts confirmed her consulting fees were in line with industry standards. Art historians testified that her authentication methods were beyond reproach. And when the Crown rested, Quinn moved for directed acquittal. The judge, a severe woman in her 60s named Justice Margaret Thornton, took 2 days to deliberate. When court reconvened, the courtroom was packed. Press, observers, Dominic in the back row looking like he hadn't slept in days. Isabelle met his eyes across the room. He nodded once. "Trust me," the gesture said, "we'll survive this." "Having reviewed the Crown's evidence," Justice Thornton began, "I find insufficient basis to allow this matter to proceed to jury deliberation. The Crown has demonstrated that Ms. Chen worked extensively for organizations controlled by Mr. Ashford. However, working for a person suspected of criminal activity does not itself constitute conspiracy. The Crown has failed to prove Ms. Chen had knowledge of or participated in criminal conduct. The authentication work she performed appears to be precisely that, legitimate expert analysis. Accordingly, I am directing an acquittal on all charges." The courtroom erupted. Emma Wright's face went purple with fury. Quinn smiled like a shark spotting blood, and Isabelle stood on shaking legs as the judge dismissed her, free, vindicated, and utterly exhausted. Dominic was waiting outside the courthouse, flanked by security but otherwise alone. When he saw her, something in his controlled expression cracked. "Isabelle." She walked into his arms, not caring about the photographers, the reporters shouting questions, the spectacle they were making. He held her like she was precious, breakable, found after being lost. "I thought I'd lose you," he murmured into her hair. 8 months thinking I'd lose you." "You won't ever," she pulled back to look at him. "But Dominic, we can't keep doing this, living on the edge, waiting for the next investigation, the next threat. I can't, I'm not strong enough." "Then we change?" He cupped her face. "I've been working on something, legitimizing operations, selling off the gray area businesses, focusing on the legal enterprises. It'll take time, but Isabelle, I want a life with you, a real life, not constantly looking over our shoulders. You do that, give up your empire." "I'd give up anything for you," he kissed her forehead. "You're all that matters, everything else is just art." She laughed, the sound bubbling up from somewhere deep and genuine. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me, and it's about crime. Well, I am a criminal, allegedly. His smile was crooked, beautiful. Come home, Isabelle, let's start planning our actual future. Home where? The estate. Wherever you want, England, France, Italy, somewhere with good museums and better wine, somewhere we can just be. I want London, she laced her fingers through his. I want the estate and the museum and the life we've been building. I want it all, Dominic, with you. Then let's go home. They left the courthouse together, stepping into their future, uncertain, complicated, and theirs. The Ashford Museum of European Art opened on a rain-soaked Tuesday in April. Critics who'd expected a vanity project were stunned into silence by the collection, over 200 pieces spanning 5 centuries, impeccably curated, open to the public 3 days a week. Isabelle stood in the central gallery, watching visitors admire the Monet, the Klimt, the carefully acquired treasures that had once moved through shadows and now hung in proper light. Beside her, Dominic held their 6-month-old daughter, Sophia, who was more interested in chewing her fist than the masterpieces surrounding her. She has your taste in art, Dominic observed, complete indifference. She's 6 months old, give her time. Isabelle touched Sophia's dark hair, her heart swelling with almost painful love. Besides, she comes by it honestly, her parents are art thieves. Reformed art thieves, mostly. Mostly. He grinned, unrepentant. There's a Botticelli in Qatar that really should be in Florence. I might have plans. Dominic. Very distant plans, years away, after Sophia's in university. He kissed their daughter's head. I'm a respectable businessman now, museum founder, philanthropist, father. All my crimes are historical. Historical crimes are still crimes. True, but the statute of limitations on most of them has expired. He handed Sophia to her, wrapping his arms around them both. And I served my penance, 8 months thinking I'd destroyed your life. That's punishment enough for several lifetimes. Isabelle leaned into him, watching museum visitors examine art that had survived wars and theft and the passage of centuries. Some pieces had complicated histories. They'd done their best to return works with proven Holocaust provenance to make restitution where possible. But others had been saved from destruction, preserved when they might have been lost. The world wasn't black and white, neither was justice. She'd made peace with that. No regrets, Dominic asked quietly. Only that it took me so long to admit I wanted this. She turned in his arms. I spent so long thinking I had to choose between the person I was and the person I could become, between morality and happiness, between the rules and you. And now I know better. I'm not who I was when we met, and that's okay. People evolve, circumstances change. Love, she touched his face. Love complicates everything and makes it all worthwhile. Even when love starts with a criminal threatening your family. Especially then shows commitment. He laughed, the sound echoing through the gallery. A few visitors looked over, smiling at the sight, a young family admiring art together, perfectly ordinary, perfectly normal. They had no idea, couldn't imagine the path that had led here, the compromises and sacrifices, the crimes and redemptions, the woman who'd chased a criminal and the criminal who'd loved her enough to change. What are you thinking? Dominic asked. Isabelle smiled, holding their daughter standing in their museum surrounded by beauty and history and the future they'd built together. I'm thinking I would do it all again, every moment, every choice, all of it. Even the scary parts. Especially the scary parts. She kissed him, soft and sweet and certain. You told me to run if I dared, that you'd always find me, you were right, but what you didn't know was that eventually I'd stop running, that I'd turn around and find you instead. And here we are. Here we are. Outside, London continued, 7 million people living their lives, unaware of the love story that had unfolded in the shadows. A woman who'd lost herself and found something better. A man who'd ruled an empire and traded it for happiness. A daughter who'd grow up surrounded by art and love and the kind of complicated truth that couldn't be captured in simple stories. Sophia gurgled, reaching for the light streaming through the gallery windows. Isabelle laughed, adjusting her hold, and Dominic's hand settled warm and solid on her back. They'd survived everything: threats and trials, betrayals and violence, the weight of their choices and the cost of their love. And they'd emerged here in the light together. It was enough, more than enough, it was everything.